The collapse of Bernard L. Madoff investment securities in December 2008 represents far more than the implosion of history's largest Ponzi scheme. It serves as the definitive case study in the vulnerability of global financial markets. Madoff's fraud involved approximately $64.8 billion in fabricated asset value and over $18 billion in direct investor losses. The Madoff deception fundamentally altered the trajectory of financial regulation, the legal framework of asset recovery, and the standards of fiduciary due diligence. Madoff started his firm in 1960 as a penny stock trader with $5,000 earned from working as a lifeguard and sprinkler installer, along with a $50,000 loan from his in-laws. By the early 1980s, his firm had evolved into an industry leader, utilizing early electronic trading systems that would eventually form the basis of the NASDAQ exchange. Madoff himself was appointed chairman of the NASDAQ in 1990, a position that cemented his status as a titan of Wall Street. This immense reputational capital was the primary mechanism he used to deflect regulatory suspicion for decades. The fraud was operated out of a secretive back office on the 17th floor of the Lipstick Building in Manhattan, intentionally siloed from the legitimate market-making operations on the 18th and 19th floors. This structural duality allowed Madoff to present a facade of transparency while concealing a massive manual Ponzi operation. While the legitimate arm processed high-volume institutional trades, the investment advisory arm functioned as a black box where investor capital was simply deposited into a Chase Manhattan bank account rather than being invested in the market. The central myth of the Madoff operation was the split strike conversion strategy. Madoff claimed to achieve remarkably consistent returns, typically 10 to 15% annually with almost no volatility, by purchasing a basket of Standard & Poor's 100 stocks and hedging the positions with out-of-the-money options. In reality, no such trading occurred after the early 1990s, and potentially earlier. Instead, a team of complicit employees, including Annette Bongiorno and Joanne Krupe, used historical market data from sources like the Wall Street Journal to key punch fake trades into a giant typewriter system that generated retroactive confirmations. These confirmations were meticulously backdated to reflect profitable entry and exit points, creating an illusion of market timing ability that defied mathematical probability. The strategy was predicated on a closed-loop system of capital flows. When a client requested a withdrawal, Madoff utilized the principle of newer investors to pay out the returns and principle of earlier investors. This mechanism relied heavily on a constant influx of capital from feeder funds, which were intermediary entities that pulled money from thousands of smaller investors and channeled it to Madoff in exchange for lucrative fees. Funds like Fairfield Greenwich Group and Tremont Group steered billions into Madoff's hands, often failing to perform adequate due diligence while collecting massive management fees. This catastrophic lapse in due diligence was largely orchestrated by Madoff himself, who possessed a complex mix of personality traits and interpersonal tactics that enabled his fraud to survive for decades. Despite his immense wealth and status, he projected an unassuming and reserved personality. People who met him found him to be somewhat standoffish, but his apparent humility made him seem like a safe conservative choice rather than a flashy scam artist. He was a master marketer who intentionally cultivated an aura of exclusivity, employing a velvet rope syndrome where he would frequently turn possible investors away. Investors who gained access believed they had entered the inner circle of a money-making genius. He convinced people that he was doing them a service and a benefit by allowing them to invest, making clients fiercely loyal and afraid to withdraw their funds or ask questions in case they could not get back in. He was also a captivating speaker and a wonderful storyteller. He used his extensive knowledge of the financial industry to impress and distract regulators and clients alike. His reputation was so overwhelming that it bred blind faith. As one former associate noted, "You can doubt God, but you don't doubt Bernie." This charisma masked a highly manipulative and predatory nature. Madoff mastered the art of affinity fraud by intentionally exploiting the inherent trust within identifiable groups. By networking within the Jewish community and at elite country clubs in New York, Florida, and Minnesota, Madoff weaponized his social circles, manipulating people who trusted him precisely because of their shared backgrounds and affiliations. Beneath this reserved exterior lay a deeply intimidating and authoritative predator, When his authority was questioned, Madoff quickly shed his humble facade. He routinely threatened institutional investors that he would return all their money if they dared to ask questions, once even standing in front of a room of Swiss bankers and telling them they were stupid and didn't know anything about finance. During Securities and Exchange Commission examinations, he actively intimidated junior examiners by name-dropping high-level SEC officials and asserting his own power. If pressed for specific trading documents, he became furious, with one examiner recalling that his veins were popping out of his neck as his voice grew increasingly loud to shut down their inquiries. This calculated duality, presenting himself as a humble, exclusive financial genius while relentlessly intimidating anyone who dared to look closer, effectively short-circuited the normal due diligence of investors and regulators. The impact on the nonprofit sector was catastrophic. Hundreds of charities and foundations were forced to shutter their operations or severely curtail grants. The casualties included the Elie Wiesel Foundation for Humanity, which lost $15.2 million, and Yeshiva University, which lost approximately $100 million. The Jet Foundation, which supported criminal justice reform, was forced to cease all operations and shutter within days of the fraud's exposure, abruptly halting funding for critical legal challenges and social services. The tragedy extended far beyond financial ruin, leading to devastating personal tolls and suicides among victims. French banker René-Thierry Magon de la Ville de Houchet, who had invested all of his wealth and billions of his clients' money with Madoff, tragically took his own life shortly after the scandal broke. British soldier William Foxton also died by suicide after losing his family's savings. The devastation even reached Madoff's own family, as his son Mark Madoff was found dead in his apartment from an apparent suicide exactly 2 years after turning his father in to the authorities. The sheer longevity of Madoff's fraud was enabled by a staggering failure of regulatory oversight. Harry Markopoulos, a financial fraud investigator and former options trader, identified the mathematical impossibility of Madoff's returns as early as 1999. Markopoulos noted that Madoff's return stream rose at a steady 45-degree angle with virtually no down months, a pattern that simply does not exist in the volatile reality of financial markets. Based on this, Markopoulos concluded that Madoff was either running a Ponzi scheme or front-running the market using insider knowledge. Despite Markopoulos submitting detailed and comprehensive complaints to the Securities and Exchange Commission in 2000, 2001, and 2005, the SEC failed to uncover the scheme. In his 2005 submission titled "The World's Largest Hedge Fund is a Fraud," Markopoulos outlined approximately 30 red flags, including the impossibility of Madoff's returns and the unrealistic volume of options he claimed to trade. The SEC conducted multiple investigations, but staffed them with inexperienced personnel who lacked the financial literacy to understand complex derivatives. They focused too narrowly on the possibility of front-running and accepted Madoff's evasive and intimidating answers at face value. Most egregiously, they never took the most critical step in examining a potential Ponzi scheme, verifying the subject's trading through an independent third party. A simple inquiry to the depository trust company would have immediately revealed that Madoff was not trading in anywhere near the volume he claimed, but the SEC never followed through. The scheme finally unraveled during the 2008 global financial crisis. As the market plummeted and investors sought liquidity, they tried to withdraw $7 billion from the firm. Unbeknownst to them, Madoff's Chase account had dwindled to dangerously low levels. With the economy in freefall, he could not secure enough new capital to meet the avalanche of redemption requests. On December 10, 2008, Madoff confessed to his sons that the asset management arm of the firm was a giant Ponzi scheme and one big lie. His sons, who worked in the legitimate trading division, immediately contacted lawyers who alerted federal prosecutors, and Madoff was arrested the following morning. He eventually pleaded guilty to 11 federal crimes and received a 150-year prison sentence, dying behind bars in 2021. In the aftermath, the liquidation of Madoff's firm became the most successful asset recovery effort in the history of financial fraud. Irving Picard, the court-appointed trustee under the Securities Investor Protection Act, led this unprecedented initiative. Picard utilized a net equity principle, determining that customers were only entitled to the principal they had originally deposited minus any withdrawals. This approach meant that the fictitious profits reported on Madoff's fake statements were completely ignored. Based on this net equity calculation, the trustee initiated over 1,000 clawback lawsuits against the so-called net winners, investors who had withdrawn more money than they put in. The total recovery amount was heavily bolstered by massive settlements from high-profile individuals and feeder funds. The highest profile settlement came from the estate of Jeffrey Picower, a Madoff associate whose widow agreed to return a staggering $7.2 billion to other victims, marking the largest single civil forfeiture in American judicial history. Additionally, the trustee successfully secured settlements of $1 billion with the Tremont Group, $1 billion with the liquidator for the Fairfield Century Funds, and $687 million with the Thema International Fund. As of April 2026, the trustee has recovered or reached agreements to recover approximately $15.378 billion through the trustee's ongoing distributions and cash advances from the Securities Investor Protection Corporation. Approximately $15.377 billion has been distributed to customers with allowed claims to date. While Madoff's scheme erased approximately $64.8 billion in fabricated asset value, the actual stolen principal was roughly $17.5 to $18 billion. Because of these relentless recovery efforts, victims with allowed claims have recovered at least 72.8% of their recognized losses. Furthermore, when combined with the efforts of the Department of Justice's separate Madoff Victim Fund, which distributed an additional $4.3 billion in forfeited assets, eligible victims have ultimately achieved an astonishing 93.71% recovery of their actual fraud losses. The fallout from the Madoff scandal extended far beyond the immediate victims, exposing the dangers of asymmetrical information, the illusion of reputation, and the catastrophic consequences of regulatory complacency. The disaster prompted significant legislative changes to prevent history from repeating itself. The Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010 was passed to overhaul financial regulation, bringing enhanced oversight to the markets. Critically, it established powerful new whistleblower bounty programs at the SEC and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. These programs provide strong anti-retaliation protections and offer financial rewards of 10 to 30% of collected sanctions to individuals who voluntarily report original information about securities violations. This was a direct response to the SEC's failure to listen to Harry Markopolos, recognizing that internal tips and industry whistleblowers are often the most effective tools for uncovering complex financial crimes. Today, as organizations continue to face modern threats, from digital Ponzi schemes orchestrated through cryptocurrency platforms to sophisticated deepfake and AI-fueled frauds, the lessons of the Madoff legacy remain as critical as ever. Modern bad actors do not wait for regulatory clarity. They act with lightning speed to weaponize emerging technologies. Yet the fundamental rules of investing have not changed. The Madoff debacle serves as a stark and permanent reminder that high returns are always tethered to high risk, that investments must be thoroughly understood before capital is committed, and that rigorous independent due diligence can never be replaced by blind trust or exclusive reputations. The Madoff scandal reminds us that in the world of finance, if an investment seems too good to be true, it almost certainly is. As we navigate modern markets with emerging technologies and new digital assets, the need for rigorous independent due diligence is more critical than ever. What do you think? Could a fraud of this staggering magnitude happen again today? Or have whistleblower programs and regulatory reforms built a strong enough defense? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into the Madoff legacy insightful, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our future content. Stay vigilant, always verify, and we will see you in the next video.